Hello everyone, and welcome to this meetup when we will talk today about a lot about AI. So a bit of applauses for us. Thank you. So a few words. We're hosting this meetup in the Monday offices. For those who doesn't know Monday is a company which build work management platform. So it's a platform to manage your work. We have many different products built on top of this platform. We have Monday Work Management, Monday CRM, Monday Dev, Monday Services. And if you're still not using Monday, please sign up and try it this evening. And what we're going to do today is we will talk about AI and how AI is changing engineering, how AI is changing our day-to-day work. And the first talk in this meetup will be about AI-powered tools that can make you a 10x engineer. Okay, so my name is Vlad. I'm engineering director here on Monday for the past 5 years, and with me on the stage is Liran.
Hi guys, I'm Liran. 4 years as a senior tech lead in Monday.
And me and Liran are working together in Monday. We're working also in the past in our previous company, and our hobby that we usually like to do is to travel together for some different conferences and to give some lectures. So this is the trip we did 6 years ago to Switzerland, I think it was. And to keep the tradition, 6 months ago we went to give the same talk that we're doing today for our R&D all hands meeting. It was in Warsaw, and I think with all the technology that it's coming, around AI, probably in 6 years from now the travels will look like this. I hope that not, but everything is possible. And I don't know if you figured out or not, but AI is coming everywhere. Okay, AI is in our day-to-day. Every one of us are using ChatGPT. Every one of us are, I hope, start using some of the tools in our day-to-day work. So it is everywhere, from the personal life to here. Yeah. Okay. So everywhere from the personal life to our work life, and it's all started 2.5 years ago from small company back then, OpenAI releasing ChatGPT. I will not go very deep into history. I think all of us read about this enough. But since then, a lot of more players are coming to the game of LLM. So we have Google with Gemini, we have Facebook, we have lately also China is getting to the play with DeepSeek. And now every industry is asking itself a question: how AI technology are going to disrupt the market? Okay, almost every product, every platform here, is asking these questions to themselves. And the funny part is actually that our industry, engineering, high tech, is getting affected the most. And I think that we are progressing in adoption of LLMs and all the latest Gen AI technologies faster than any other industry. It's all started with the GitHub Copilot that I think a year and a half ago everyone was talking about this, and now almost every month new products are raising. Top 9, Cursor, Qodo, new vibe coding tools like Lovable, Base 44, and many, many more. And actually, it's not only that so many companies and so many products are getting up, but also it's getting adopted. So just to give you a glance of the adoption of this, I want to ask you a question. How much do you think in Google, what's the percentage of code is generated by AI? They actually revealed this number a few quarters ago in their earnings call. So if you heard about this, you know the answer. But let's try to do a survey. Okay, so who thinks that it's 7%? Please raise your hands. Okay, cool. Pessimistic. Who thinks it's 13%? Okay, Liran, what's that? No, it's pager duty?
I'm on call, so I guess.
Okay, not a cool time to get an incident, but okay, we'll get back to the reviewing the results of this survey, but looks like we have an incident.
Yeah, so okay. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna see how an incident that we actually had in Monday at the end of 2024 that almost took production down entirely for Monday, how this is gonna get resolved, not in the future, but today with AI. Don't worry, no AI was armed. Just a quote for the recording there, in case it's watched by AI. Cool, so I'm part of a team named MondayDB. This is a tier 1 service in Monday, which means if it's down, entire Monday is down. And one of our underlying databases is Cassandra. And basically what we experienced is that Cassandra was overloaded due to too many concurrent requests. And let's see how AI is handling this incident. So the main tool for the job is Cursor, basically Visual Studio Code enriched with AI. First, I'm going to open the chat tab. Now, this is just like any chat interface like ChatGPT, but designed for developers, tailored for technical questions. And most importantly, it's indexed the entire code base in advance, so the code base is part of the index that we can discuss with. So I'm going to ask Cursor what's the main function making requests to Cassandra, and I'm tagging this code base. And let's press the submit button. Cool. So he's searching in files of the project. And very quickly, we can see he narrows down to this execute query function, which is indeed the main function making request. Also, there's this query params, query options, execute options. So I can now discuss it with the chat and ask what it means, what are the trade-offs, what flows can trigger this function. And appreciate a new developer onboarded to your team that can now take the time to explore the project, explore the different flows, ask questions about the technologies. Today, without AI, in the best case scenario, you need to wait for a team member to be available for him, and of course, occupy his teammate time. And in the worst case scenario, he will just be too shy. He will need to pick what he is asking and just don't ask sometimes, which of course leads to a much less efficient onboarding experience and bugs if he has knowledge gaps. And so I think this is amazing for onboarding. And the second tab is this agent mode, which is now the default these days. And unlike the chat, which is meant for discussion, the compose agent mode is where we're gonna compose new code or modify existing code. And the agent basically means that it's much more iterative approach. So it's not just request response. It can actually have tools like surfing the internet, opening the web browser. So for example, you might ask it to implement something. It will ask for clarifications, and then it will write code, run the test, inspect the output, maybe go to the web to read about the official documentation, modify that code accordingly, run the test again. So it's much, much more intelligent. Cool. So I'm going to ask it, how should we protect ourselves from concurrent requests to execute query function? Let's see what it does. So now it's becoming interesting. What we see here is that through the MCP protocol, he actually phrased in his own question in his own words, and he sent this to this monday.com dev expert AI. Now, this is an AI we developed in Monday. It's like ChatGPT, but enriched with our standards, our code base, our best practices, our ecosystem of technologies, even ownership about what teams own in each part of code. And this is a great way to really tailor Cursor to our own world. Using this MCP protocol, you can basically provide tools to the Cursor. It can be different LLMs or just external MCPs of other providers. For example, we might expose MCP for PagerDuty, for the login provider, for Datadog metrics. Imagine I started this demo by knowing I have too many concurrent requests to Cassandra. But instead, maybe I could just paste a link to the PagerDuty URL. Then he would use PagerDuty MCP to understand what's going on, to make extra requests to the login and Datadog metrics with the MCP of login provider and Datadog. Maybe we can ask him what team is owning the section of code that he found. So this is really, really much more powerful. And we'll talk about it a bit later. So let's see what is happening. Cool. So what we see now is that based on the response from this MCP protocol, he suggested me to use the Monday concurrency limiter package. Vlad, did you know about this package?
No, first time I'm seeing it.
So it makes sense. We have really dozens of such internal in-house packages developed in Monday and internal technologies. And even for a senior It's kind of hard to remember everything and even know about everything. For sure, it's hard for a new developer. And this is amazing for tool discovery. Moreover, we can use this for standards alignment, best practices alignment, and we'll discuss about MCP later. Cool. So this sounds promising. Go ahead, implement this protection for me. So now I'm expecting him to use the library to protect the execute query function. OK, so what we see here is also interesting. We see that he tried to import the Monday concurrency limiter package, and then he encountered this lint error that the model doesn't exist. And this makes sense because no one used it in the microservice before. So what he wants to do, he wants to open the terminal and install the package for me. I'm going to allow it. I can also use the auto-run setting, so I don't need to manually press those kind of buttons every time. But for the presentation, it's useful. So let's allow it to install the package for me. And now we will actually install the Monday concurrency limiter package, and then it can continue with implementation. Cool, so let's review the changes now. So first thing we'll see that he imported the package and also some Redis service that was already in existence from the microservice code base. And basically, from the package, he imported the with concurrency limit function. Now this is some wrapper, like decorator, that just allows you to give it as input an existing function, and it outputs the same function but protected. So this is what we need, actually. In the chat, he also explains what's the different parameters, why he chose them. We can see integrated with the microservice Redis service, which means now the concurrency is tracked across pods and not just in a specific pod process memory. He integrated with the Monday logger package and Monday metric package, like any other component would in this microservice. And basically, I think we kind of covered. Now, just think how easy it was for me from the moment I wanted to explore to understand what piece of code I want to protect, to understand how I want to protect it, to actually implement the protection and do it in the Monday way. And I think a round of applause to AI. But I want you to meet Eviatar. He's my manager. And he once told me, Liran, dear Balak, you are a service owner of a tier 1 service. You really need to deploy things with care. You can't just change a major important component like execution of a query and deploy to the world and hope for the best. And I think Eviatar is right, especially because we have a compensation review soon. And we want to implement a feature, a gradual release service that will implement this gradually, right? So let's ask Cursor to implement a feature request. OK, let's submit. Cool, he's caring about my boss' peace of mind. And let's review what is done. Boom. I think this looks good. Who thinks he did a good job?
Actually, I think it's not, because you asked for the feature flag, because you wanted to gradually roll it out. And here it's using system flags, which is a kill switch true false, which is also cool, but I think your gradual release would be nicer. OK, so it makes sense. He implemented a circuit breaker, and we actually wanted a method to release this gradually. And this brings me to the point that you should really adopt this skeptical mindset for everything generated by AI, for coding all the same, and really take responsibility. This is a real testimony from our Slack. Cursor couldn't handle failing test, so we just solved it by suggesting to bypass and force push to the Git repo. And really be minded about the mistakes he might do. OK, cool. So I'm the service owner. I'm going to add now the gradual release service as context and ask it to implement it with the gradual release service.
and now I'm expecting it to modify the code accordingly and use the correct layer of protection. Okay, this looks much better. But since I was a young baby, my mom always told me, job is not done, it's not fully tested. And mom is always right. So tests are actually yet another piece of code, right? Why not let AI also generate the test for me? So let's do it. And let's review. OK. So what we see they did, first he added those two mocks, which is nice. I ate all this boilerplate mumbo-jumbo of mocking, and I never remember the right syntax. And second, we see added the testing, but he did this for two cases, right? He did this for the case that feature flag is on and feature flag is off. Now, in my long experience as a developer, this is kind of rare. Usually, developers don't add tests for the previous state that is about to get deprecated and do this extra mocking for the gradual release service. Not because they're lazy, even though personally I am lazy, but just because there is a trade-off about the amount of effort you're going to put to test every single branch of tree in the execution of the flow. But now with AI, it's just one prompt away. So really, why not have the better coverage and increase the quality of the code? I also want to encourage to use cursor roles. Basically, you can create different files, and each file is a set of rules that are going to hint cursor how you expect it to behave. For example, you can have a rule dedicated for how to test JavaScript in the Monday way or your organization way. You can have global rules like testing JavaScript across all microservices. You can have specific rules dedicated for your microservice where you can provide the domain knowledge like your file structure and technologies and architecture and do's and don'ts about your microservice. So I'm just encouraging you to explore this. Cool. So the next thing I want to mention is I want to introduce Qodo. Qodo is an Israeli startup, and they focus on code quality. Now, they do all sorts of things in this area, like logical coverage, not by lines of code, but by use cases or automatic test generation. But we're going to focus on the PR agent. And now, if you think about it, this is the war of the machine, right? We're going to let one AI fight a different AI and challenge it. So let the fight begin. Cool. So I'm going to commit my code to GitHub. Now I told you I'm lazy, so why not let it also generate the commit message for me? And I'm going to push it as a pull request. And then through GitHub integration, Qodo in the background will start going over the PR like a human would. Let's open the PR. And I'm expecting it to comment and modify the description. Cool, it did it. So we see two things here. First, it did classification of two labels. This can be actual GitHub labels, so you can later easily gather statistics or find the PRs, for example, that contained configuration change or test or whatever you want to track. And second, it did this nice, concise description, which can actually help the human reviewer. If you scroll down a bit, you can see also by file what was changed and what lines of code it was changed, which is also making the experience of reviewing for the human much more effective. We all know the industry fact that the smaller the PR, the more love and attention it gets, right? 10 lines of code PR will get 10 comments, but 1,000 lines of code PR will also get 10 comments. And it's just because it's harder to reason about big PRs and it's time-consuming, and this minimizes the gap a bit and making the PR review also in higher quality. But I think the really interesting part is actually that Qodo can have code suggestion like a human would. In this example, he noted that I used hard-coded configuration for protection, and he suggested me to extract it to environment variables. We can provide our style guides and best practices. to tailor it to our needs. We can even have custom prompts like, if the code touches SQL, suggest a circuit breaker or gradual release or stuff like that. And moreover, for each applied suggestion, it learns over time and improves itself. So I think this is kind of a good suggestion. Let's apply it. And now Qodo will actually suggest the commit that fixes the issue that he found earlier. And I'm going to commit the change. And done. I think another round of applauses to AI.
Cool, amazing. I think that what we went through right now is that in just 10 minutes, okay, plus minus, we've built a fully featured, tested, covered with protection, code reviewed, and like it can really go to production, which I think it's wouldn't be possible a year ago to even having the close to this performance of implementing things. As Liran mentioned before, we want to talk a bit more about MCP because I think it's super important tool that makes Cursor or any other agentic application you're using much more powerful. So first of all, like we called MCP 10 times already today. How many of you knows what MCP is and what the acronym stands for? Okay, most of you. I'll still repeat for those who don't. So MCP is the Model Context Protocol. It's a protocol that was invented by Anthropic a year ago, but just in the past few months it became really a big thing in the industry. And the bottom line, MCP is just an API for agentic applications. Okay, so like you have the Cursor or Claude or whatever other agent you're using, and over MCP it can go to use other third-party systems, either hosted MCP servers on your computer or remote MCP servers, which becoming more of a trend right now. So you can go to any other system that you're using, and actually you can look at this as a Lego bricks that any of the system that you use day to day, like Sentry, Datadog, CoreLogic, or any others, is exposing the API to your Cursor, and your Cursor orchestrates the calls to those system to retrieve the data or perform an action on those on your behalf. And of course, I couldn't not use the opportunity to market Monday MCP that we just released a few weeks ago, and this is the thing that it allows you to do. It allows you, if you're using Monday in your company, so you can connect it easily with just one URL to your Cursor, and you know, it will update your tasks and do whatever you want straight from Cursor inside of Monday, which is pretty cool. And I want to share a few real-life examples of how we're using MCPs here in Monday to, you know, make working with Cursor even cooler and deeper. So the first one is the Docker image analyzer. So this is some internal MCP server that you can configure just by copy-pasting URL into your Cursor configuration. And what it's doing, it's going over your microservice, getting your Docker image file, and try to understand how to optimize it. Okay, optimize for size, for build time, for you know, in general, having the better organization of your Docker image. And bottom line, it's not doing something extraordinary. There are tons of tools that are optimizing your Docker images and everything. So it's not the achievement by its own, but the fact that it is super well integrated within your Cursor, and just in the, you know, one prompt away from you, it's making it much more accessible than it's any other application that you had before. And actually, here are like just a few Slack messages that, you know, people figure this out, sometimes even, you know, not intentionally. They were working on with the Cursor, and he found out that's like, maybe you want to optimize your image file, and we got really cool results. And another example is DevExpert. This is what also Liran mentioned before. So this is our own internal LLM agentic application that is enriched with all of the internal knowledge about Monday, about our code base, documentation, design system, style guides, and so on. So whenever Cursor cannot understand something from the context of the code base of your specific microservice or micro frontend, which library to use, which component to use, how to use it in a better way, he can ask a question to DevExpert and get an answer immediately over the MCP protocol, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah.
So what of agent is the context. So if you take the entire context, like it's a huge context, and many times they go lost.
Yeah. So
how do you tackle this issue?
Cool. So the question is, thank you very much. So the question is how to deal with the problem of context. So I think like if the context is too big, and probably all of these things is a huge amount of information that we have about all of those stuff. So the idea is that MCP, you can expose tools, okay? And like every tool is the specific separate LLM. So for example, you can have a tool which is called Ask Design System, and it will be this specific tool will be LLM with the context of only design system. And then the Cursor, as the orchestrator, will understand from the tools the dev experts exposing to you to him which tool to use, and then this tool will be only enriched with the context of design system, for example. Now we're coming to another problem that Cursor supports up to 40 tools in one MCP server, and now the industry is trying to find out a solution for this with MCP gateways or namespaces or tool sets. There is no one solution for that, but the idea is to slice it to the specific problem so he can understand which problem he needs to ask, which tool he needs to ask, and then this tool will be more scoped. Did I answer? So again, entire code base, we are almost not in the monolithic application. So he usually works in the context of the code base of your service, and usually it's not so big, so he can still find this out. And also Cursor inside is using RAG, so like he's not taking the whole code base for every prompt. Yeah, he's indexing your code base and finds the right places with vector search.
We actually implemented our own RAG on the code base. So whenever there is terminology, for example, Cassandra, it would first narrow it down to the relevant sections and only search on them as context, only provide them as context. So it's not like for every input we're going to throw the entire code base.
This is what I'm looking for. And regarding the backend front-end changes together, it works for you? You change both and...
So question is how it works for backend front-end changes together. So in general, as a best practice in Monday, we are not doing these changes together, okay? Because like you never can synchronize front-end deployment and backend deployment with the rollouts and everything. So we always deploy backend first and front-end second. So and then you are using other tools of gradual release to turn on and synchronize the backend changes with front-end.
I mean from the coding point of view.
So I personally didn't see that it built together within two repositories, front-end code with the backend code, so I don't think I saw such an example. But if it's monorepo, for example, and you're using like with server-side rendering and everything, so he has everything in the context of one repository, it might work. It works. So here is
what you could do usually, you can open a new workspace in the IDE, and then you can attach different repositories, for example, your front-end repository and the back-end repository, and then Cursor has the knowledge of both, and it can synchronize code changes for both together.
Cool, yeah.
Question, did you implement your RAG as an MCP, or does Cursor have a special place to, like, I know it indexes the repository by itself. You said you helped him with it, or replace his native indexing?
So the question if we implemented the indexing as MCP or somehow replace the Cursor RAG, and I will let Liran answer this.
So first of all, I didn't develop it personally, but to the best of my knowledge, this was like a dedicated interface, like chat interface we developed, and then we took the opportunity of the MCP to expose it to Cursor. So you could even ask the dev expert directly without MCP in theory, but we exposed it through MCP, and then it was much more powerful. Okay.
Did you use the resources layer also for exposing, like, I don't know, documentation, static, or maybe correlation between repository or something like that?
So
Repeat the question.
So the question was if we expose this as a resource layer, you mean like MCP type of resource?
Yes, we have the tools, and you can have like resources, right?
So I think yes, like we categorize this as resource, but again, I don't think it's very it matters very much, like how it's implemented.
Cool. Okay, so just to close up this story, let's talk a bit about what's now and what you can take out of this cool example that we showed. So first of all, we really strongly believe, and we saw this in the past 5-6 months since we did this talk in our R&D kickoff event, that this is the only way to scale right now. Okay, that's like AI revolution. It's something that comes in. I think it's bigger than anything else we witnessed before. It's bigger than internet. It's bigger than mobile phones, and it is something that is changing our life a bit later. Something that is changing our life, very, very fast. And this is something that can really makes us 10x more productive. And actually, how to measure how much more productive we are becoming, this will be our second talk on this meetup, so stay tuned. And coming back to the question that I was asking in the beginning, how much lines of code Google generates with AI. So they announced, and it was 2 quarters ago, so maybe now it's more than quarter of their new code is generated by AI. The same thing, Lyft is announced, and Pinterest similar numbers, and many, many other companies. So, like 25% of code in Google on the scale of Google is generated by AI is insane just to think about this. And if someone would tell me that this will be the case 2 years ago when ChatGPT just went out, I would say, no, it's not possible. So the thing is here, okay? Like it's getting into the day-to-day, and if you are not in this boat, it's a problem. And for example, from our point of view, since we did this talk, it's too bright slide, but like we had the plus 54% adoption of Cursor inside of the company, and right now we're in around 95% of developers who are using it, and using it in the day-to-day on a weekly basis. So it is also happening inside, not in some ephemeral Google, but also in our company. And still there are some people who are not adopting it, and like you probably, if you're here, you're also still discovering if this is some good option for you or not. And there are multiple reasons why people are not adopting AI. So first of all, we still need to admit it's not a silver bullet, okay? It's still a technology that's sometimes doing mistakes, sometimes hallucinating. Like even in the scenario that we showed to you today, sometimes we had to do a few takes because he was not doing exactly what we wanted to do, okay? So you still need to apply your judgment, and it's not going to replace us yet, maybe soon. Second thing, it's on us. It's about changing the way how we work. It's going out of the comfort zone. It's changing IDE. Okay, Cursor is VS Code based, and like people who had hard times to switch from WebStorm to this, some of the people. So it's also changing the paradigm how you are working with this agent. Sometimes, asking its question, you are saying, no, I will just go and fix the code myself. And like, for example, we are doing from time to time in the teams training days when you are not allowed to write a line of code. You can do everything only through the agent interface. So you need to teach yourself how to use this new way of vibe coding, if you want to say it so. And the third thing that's like some people are saying that's like, no, it's still it's only for POCs and small things. And I hope that we showed you today the example that it's really not. And we see more and more inside of Monday, production ready code going to production, which was mostly generated by Cursor, which is amazing, I think. And the last tip I want to give, and something that we're also, trying to not to fall in love with the specific tools and technologies we have right now, because a year ago it was GitHub Copilot, today it's Cursor, tomorrow it will be something else. So we need to be still open-minded and get into the, learning state of mind that things are gonna change. And actually, I would want to rephrase all of the things that we started from about 10x, that 10x is becoming a new norm. So if you're not going to adopt those things, you're going to be 0.1x developer. And I'm not sure it's good for any one of you. And I think that's the only one recommendation is just do it, adopt it, play with it. The world is changing, and we should change with it together. So thank you very much. And please give your feedback. Here is the QR code. Talia, I added this slide, so if you have any more questions, this is the time to ask.
Yes, aren't you afraid of skills degradation with your engineers?
Wow, the question is, aren't we afraid about skills degradation of the engineers? It's an amazing question. I think like overall, all of this revolution is coming up with multiple challenges. So one thing is like, if we don't need junior developers anymore, when we will get new seniors in 10 years? And I think the answer is we still need junior developers, and we need still people to be able to, and to know how to write code, and we need to balance, like that. If everyone is just using AI to write code, then we will not be able to read the code by ourselves, which comes to another philosophical question: is who owns the code that Cursor writes? And now he writes much more code that we as engineers can read, and who owns the code that goes to production? So right now, at least, we are taking the concept is that if you open the PR, you still need to understand every line of code which is in this PR, and you're responsible for it. So you cannot, the same as from Stack Overflow, just copy paste some code that you have no idea what it's doing, but it works. You really need to own the code that goes on. How it will be in a few years, I don't know, hard to say, but it's for sure a challenge.
I also think that this is kind of a philosophical question, in the sense that even if we are worried that this would affect developers, it's kind of an industry issue. It's not like Monday issue. And frankly, I don't think we as Monday have much to do it, because those are tools that, if you want it or not, developers will adopt, and we can't stay behind, because for sure we see like huge value. And I think over time, I hope that the industry as a whole will also adopt like the measures to cope with those kinds of things.
Do you have statistics inside, or you are familiar with statistics about the acceptance rate of AI suggestions or corrections of what AI did?
So we have, I'm not sure about acceptance rate. We are measuring the amount of accepted lines of code which are getting into the PRs from Cursor. I'm not sure about the percentage, but the number of absolute amount of accepted lines of code is growing over time. Both when we're adding new tools like MCP integrations and everything, so he's getting more accurate, and also by just adoption by developers. About acceptance rate is a good question, need to check.
I can answer that at the end. I'll talk about it. We're talking about metrics very soon, and I can give some insights.
Yeah.
So what security controls or mechanisms are you implementing into your MCP server to prevent some abuse? So for example, if I can change your documentation on a separate Git that you draw your information from, you can probably inject very malicious code into other code bases that use the MCP.
Okay, great question. The question is about how we are incorporating security within MCP tools. So overall, I think this is also a philosophical question, as Liran mentioned. We believe that the industry is coming up with the way how to deal with this. Up until now, we didn't have the problem, because all of those MCP tools and all the MCP documentation and enrichment that is happening is internal, and it's internal only for internal developers that by default we trust. Okay, so and we also have a lot of at the end of the day, this code is still going through CI process, and all of our shift left approach on security. That's we're doing tons of security and code static analysis and gradual releases and everything. So we didn't really see right now that someone is trying to do something internally with MCP to break our security things. Where it will go, and in general, as more, we are also working on the vibe coding capabilities on top of Monday platform, and now it opens really a lot of interesting prompt attacks, and you can ask him to do things that before would be much harder to do. But still, it's all about the layering approach and how every layer is protected by its own.
And at least for the internal MCPs, you see, we have quite a lot of them. We for sure forbid any integration with production users' data and stuff like that. And not because it's not useful, it's very useful, but just for safety.
Between the lines, it sounds that the velocity is being very fast now. So what does it do to your predictions? How they changed?
So amazing question, and this is the question again that's the second talk will be exactly about. I'm very interested also to hear about this, because we have a lot of discussion internally. What does mean velocity? How to measure it? And I think the answer, if you didn't know how to measure it before introducing AI, it's very hard to compare after if you didn't have really before. And we're trying to look at a lot of different metrics: amount of code generated, amount of bugs, amount of story points that we're delivering, and everything. So bottom line, it's very hard to say absolute number was improved but X%. But we are seeing, like on the projects level. So for example, we had a project that we estimated originally for 3 main years of work, and we accomplished it within 2 weeks, okay, with AI, because it was the front-end separation project from the monolith, something you never want to do, but you have to, and it was insane. So on the specific project level, we see a crazy push. Something globally that we can measure and say, it's much harder to, get this insight from.
I think if 2 years ago, before AI, you would ask 10 managers how they are measuring velocity in their teams, most probably 10 of them will tell you they don't. And now everyone wants to measure velocity of AI, but we're actually even missing the baseline of how it was before AI. So at least
and what velocity means in general, in engineering.
Even if you know what it means. And I think now, for example, in Monday, we're actually retroactively trying to figure those baselines so we can compare post-era.
Yeah, and I think that's also another question is that maybe bottleneck is moving to another place, for example, on reviews. And this is also something we're looking at. What is the amount of reviews that every developer is doing, how much time it takes, how much time we have per review, because maybe AI generates worse code that human would generate, so there will be more cycles of reviews. So I think that we're coming to the point, I think in general, even before, we were saying that the good developer is the one who reads more code than writes. And I think now it becomes even a bigger statement that 99% of the time we are reading code. And until we will not trust Qodo that he will just be able to do the amazing review and push the code to production without human intervention, we still will have the bottleneck there. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. And I think now it's time for the second talk that will answer a lot of those questions.
Okay, so hi everyone. Happy to be here with you today. I'm Ofir Natan. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Commit AI. And I've been in the tech industry for about 20 years. I think most of them around AI and integrating AI technologies into different products and services and processes at different companies, at Intel and other startups. And my Gen AI moment was about maybe 4.5 years ago, when I accidentally joined the beta program for a then unknown company called OpenAI. And I got some early access to some cool models in the early days, including Codex, the original model behind GitHub Copilot, the first edition, which led me to try out GitHub Copilot in its early days, 2021. And I felt an interesting, had this hairs on my hand kind of went up when I started coding with AI, and I realized there was something very disruptive happening in the industry. So I left a C-level position. I was actually CTO here of another startup in the other building. And I started working with early adopters in the industry, including Monday.com, in the early days where Gen AI was just integrated into the original kind of product in the beginning, and various other companies started working on adoption of AI tools within products, R&D teams, and that's what I've been doing since. Things have scaled up, and I'll explain a bit about what we do. When working with a lot of companies to integrate AI, including into the R&D teams and software development lifecycle, I started gathering some information, and questions came up like, how do you measure this? How do we know we're in the right direction, this is helping? And so I took a bit of those insights and processes and working with a lot of companies and tried to kind of bring here today for you a bit of a few tips and insights, what tools, metrics, what frameworks do we have to measure, and I hope you can get a good idea of how this works today in the industry and what's still lacking. So before we start, I want to ask a question. Raise a hand if you think your AI is making your dev team more productive. Yeah, that's almost everyone. Keep your hands up. Only those who can quantify how much faster or how much more productive. Awesome. So except you, don't feel bad. It's okay. Companies suck at it, generally. R&D productivity is a hard thing to define and to measure, and AI impact on something that you don't really measure is pretty hard to do. Really, this is something that's been on everyone's mind recently. And I want to kind of say, hey, let's look at companies that claim that they have much more productivity, right? You have Google saying 10% on some experiments, there are controlled environments, and they say that 10% more productive their engineers, and they have some metrics and they share it. And there is a famous GitHub survey with 88% of people saying they're more productive with AI. And if you run an experiment on a simple task, you'll get 55% faster, and that's cool. But the question is really, what is the actual productivity gains that we can achieve, and how do we measure it? And we can also doubt maybe if these are applicable to our case. And let's look at some other interesting data that's not from Google or GitHub. An interesting study from Meter showed an interesting gap between perceived productivity. Developers experienced people working 5 or more years on that code base. Ask them how these tasks, how much more productive do you think you're going to be? How much faster? They said 25%. And then they finished the task, and they asked them how much faster were you? They say 20%. And then they showed them the numbers, 19% slower. So 40% gap between plus 20 and minus 20. That's interesting. So another study from Dora showed that for every 25% of AI adoption that's going up, 1.5% slowdown in delivery throughput, and 7% decrease in delivery stability. So the question remains, so I'm not going to go into whether these studies are accurate or correct or challenge those. That doesn't matter. What matters are 2 things. One, data beats hype every time, right? So that's one. And the second one is perception can be misleading. Perceived productivity and actual productivity are not really the same thing. And we may be sacrificing throughput and stability for perceived AI productivity. So it's on us to really make sure that we know what are we seeing, what are we getting, and not fall into the hype. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So our agenda for today, I think about 40 minutes and maybe some time for questions if there's time left. We'll talk a bit about state of AI in software development lifecycle. How are we in adoption? How are we in actually impact? Where are we now? And then we'll talk a bit about all the things, kind of those last questions. We're going to see what R&D productivity actually is. So many definitions. What does it mean? We're going to break that down. Talk about measurement frameworks. How do we actually break this down, and what are the different dimensions of productivity? And talk about baseline metrics, which mentioned in the last question. If we didn't ever started measuring, we need a baseline. How can we quickly start? Talking about, of course, tools, actual kind of tools that we can use to measure, different AI tools. And then we're going to end with a few tips and some case study of a Fortune 100 media company we helped integrate and see how that works at scale. Many developers, thousands. And then we'll give you some takeaways. I have a link for you at the end. Everything I'm showing here, all the links, resources you can take away, including the research and all that stuff. So let's start. Just a quick introduction about who we are. Commit is 20 years in the market, software and cloud development company. 800 employees, about 300 of them developers. Most of us are engineers. 1,200 customers and unicorns, startups, scale-ups. Big tech and various companies. And Commit AI is our AI division, which was formed from the merge of my company into Commit and became the AI division. 200 plus AI Gen AI projects in the last 2 years. 30 AI Gen AI ML people, professionals, and 62% conversion between POC and production. We're working very hard in order to productionize AI and not just run some POCs. And what we do, we help companies put AI into products, into productivity activities within organization, including the software development lifecycle, and infrastructure, which includes AI ML ops on clouds and AI engineers for companies. So that's a bit about us. Let's talk about where we are in the AI adoption stage in the industry. So we mentioned about 90+% of developers are actually using AI, and about 70+ using it regularly, which means once a week at least. Okay, 20+% of code is AI generated, like matching the numbers that Google and other companies are published. I'm kind of giving you an average of everything out there, kind of giving you the ballpark numbers. Some report more, 25, 30, some report less, and still most of the AI work is done within the IDE. Okay, that means background agents haven't taken over our work yet, and there's still a lot of underutilization across the software development lifecycle. When we'll talk about impact, I want you to remember that developers don't write code all the time. So let's say you get 25% increase in your velocity of writing code, you still have only a 10 to 15% chunk of your time acceleration. Okay, so there's a cap there, and we'll talk about that, how to really get good gains. And trending, of course, we have agentic AI and MCPs like the guys here showed us. CLI tools like Claude Code are catching up and changing the paradigm of should we have an IDE or are we terminal animals now? And emerging, of course, are the background agents, which beg a lot of the questions where how can we measure a background agent if I'm not even the one that initiated the run? So that's another interesting topic we'll touch. And of course, costs. Costs are rising. Premium requests, now the model tokens were burning like hell with agents. So the question here, rising costs, hard to show impact, hard to justify more investment. And especially at larger companies, these are multiples of thousands, and each one burns hundreds of dollars a month. Should we invest? Where should we invest? And so on. So what about impact? So adoption is rising, costs are rising. Impact, still very hard to measure and show Gen AI ROI and impact. 25% perceived productivity in coding tasks. But when you translate that, that's about 5% overall lift. We'll talk about metrics soon. And that's the reason is that until we actually cover the entire software development lifecycle and our pie of time, we have some cap that we're going to hit, okay, even if we code really fast. And there are early signs, startups, greenfield teams, which means they're working on new products, writing a lot of code and not just maintaining, keeping the lights on. They show us some interesting numbers from startups we work in. Some of them actually accelerate in orders of magnitude, but those are very tight ninja teams working on some very specific stuff, and it's not very much scalable. No, not everyone can be a power user, and this is not everyone's dream to go online and get all the cursor rules from all the repos and put all these components together. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to really get very, very efficient with these tools. So we'll talk about that. In terms of tools, this is becoming hard to choose and to see. So 350 tools from July 4th, and a month ago I had the same slide. There's 50 new every month. And the question is, how do we choose? How do we get new tools into the stack? How can we justify costs if we don't have data about what these tools actually do for us? So if we're going to wrap that up, in terms of state, it's still very hard to measure AI and productivity gains in general, and costs are rising, and companies are starting to ask some questions, and R&D teams are struggling to answer. And let's talk a bit about R&D productivity, which actually, if you ask again 10 managers what is R&D productivity for them, you'll get either 10 different answers or one that I'm not sure. And that's why we need to kind of understand this a bit more. So let's dive in and talk about a few key terms that we want to know when we're looking at metrics. We want to classify those, right? So we want to see if these are input, output, or outcome metrics. So input metrics are inputs generally the time, the dollars we invest, and the tokens we burn, right? Everything we put into the system, this is time and money. And what comes out of the other side, the outputs can be PRs, lines of code, story points, bugs. It's also output. And outcomes are actually tied into business value, features, improvement in quality, savings of dollars, revenue, and eventually these are what's interesting for the management teams, right? They want to see outcomes, not only inputs and outputs. And also we need to talk about productivity, and we have to compare it to some other terms that sometimes get confused: efficiency and effectiveness. Productivity is about getting more done within a unit of time, so that means we're producing more products, more PRs, more delivery. Efficiency is actually savings focused. So we're having the same amount of resources and the same amount of time, and we want to do it, the same amount of time and outputs, and we want to save resources. So this is a savings perspective, and a lot of companies are looking for productivity, but actually looking for efficiency. They want to save and not produce more. So, and effectiveness is actually about prioritization. So are we working on the right things? Not are we doing them quickly, are we working on the right things? And they are tied to outcomes and goals. So this is an important kind of scoping because different metrics show different dimensions of what productivity is. And the real answer is there's no single metric to measure developer productivity. And if you remember the beginning, perceived productivity and velocity actually narrows down and doesn't tell the whole story. We're moving faster on code generation, we're breaking things, stability, quality, and maybe we're paying this debt later on. Code churn comes back, we have to fix it and eventually eat into the gains. So we need a balanced approach, quality, velocity, effectiveness, and impact. And we need to also not only include perceptions, but also include quantitative measured data. Okay, so that's a bit about where we are in R&D kind of taxonomy. And the questions engineering teams are asking today, and you should be asking as well, is what does productivity or dev productivity mean for me? For my team, what is the AI impact I'm looking for? And what is a good return on my investment? Okay, this is the questions we need to answer. And in order to answer them, we need goals, because measurements are actually means to some end. And if we don't start with engineering goals, correct engineering goals, we don't know what to measure, what to optimize, and how to actually go about this process of measurement. So we're working with CTOs and CEOs, and they're all wanting to move faster and improve quality. But actually, these are too vague. And we want to break them down into a bit more definitive and kind of more well-defined goals. So one goal that we worked with the company to increase their story points delivered by 10%, but they wanted to keep the same bug density, so not affecting the quality, but just moving faster within a certain time frame, or we want to reduce the change failure rate by 10%. This is a quality goal. And when we have goals, we can start to measure accordingly about and go about actually defining the metrics we want. So generally, we discussed a bit about the state. It's hard to measure. We said it's hard to define R&D productivity. And the question is now, what are the frameworks? What are the dimensions of productivity? And how can we actually start? And before we do, I want to ask you if you think we should rethink how we measure productivity in the era of AI. So if you think we should rethink how we measure productivity, then raise your hand. And if you think we should keep the same old measurement productivity, so okay, most of you think we should not rethink, okay? So that we should keep the same measurement practices regardless of AI. And a few of you think we should rethink. So actually, from my perspective, everyone's right. Why? Why we should not rethink measuring productivity in a different way? Because inputs, outputs, engineering practices, they stay the same, right? We are looking for quality, reliability, scalability. And it's good to have a baseline to compare with. Before we added AI, after we added AI, right? So we want to make sure that we're not reinventing anything. On the other hand, AI is changing how we work. It's very early, we don't know even how it impacts. It has more dimensions like adoption, utilization, costs, hallucinations, different kind of quality issues here. And if we're not considering AI, how do we actually know we're moving in the right direction and we're adopting and utilizing it well? So it's a bit like saying the world stays the same, but everything changed, right? And we need a nice holistic approach that combines both classic engineering productivity metrics with AI flavor on top, or AI kind of dimension in there. So let's see what's out there in the market. Some of these you may know. So have anyone heard of Dora? Someone's using Dora or heard of Dora? So Dora is actually a set of 4 metrics which are very, very popular in DevOps teams. Okay, these are performance metrics. They say deployment frequency, how frequently we release products, lead time for changes, how long it takes us to actually roll out a change, time to restore a service when it's broken, and change failure rate means how much of when we change, we deploy, and we break, how many of those are happening. And this is a very deterministic set of metrics that can be measured. The problem with Dora, it's pretty narrow. It doesn't actually encompass a lot of the aspects of productivity and engineering practices. Anyone heard of space before? One of the most popular kind of more holistic frameworks. So space, by the way, I have links for everything, so don't worry, you can read more about those metrics and frameworks. Space is actually more of a mindset kind of framework, which gives us the pillars. It says that actually research backed from many, many years, satisfaction, performance, activity, collaboration, and communication, and efficiency and flow. As you can see, almost at least 2 of those 3 pillars are talking about the human aspect of being so it makes sense, right? If I'm not satisfied with the tool I have, I'll never adopt or use it or leverage it, and then the impact doesn't matter. I won't see it anyway. Okay, and the same goes for flow. If I'm switching between tools and copy pasting from ChatGPT or from context on one hand into the AI agent, then I'm having to copy the output and then push it to another place, then the flow interrupts, getting interrupted. So we're not seeing a lot of gain. So this kind of balances both the softer, more human aspects of productivity with performance, which is the classic metrics, PRs, throughput, story points, and all that stuff. And activity is generally they don't provide metrics; they provide guidelines, and they encourage us to find our own metrics in each one of those categories. So I'll explain that's not very easy to do. That's why other frameworks exist and come up and are coming up. So DevX, a very popular framework from the creators of Space, which actually is very, very focused on developer experience. This is a flow state, cognitive load, and feedback loop. We're not going to go into all of these kind of metrics within it. I just want to kind of explain to you that there are 3 foundational approaches. One is the DORA, one is the Space, and one is the DevX, and they all have different approaches. DevX is very focused on perception. These are surveys that we run, self-reported metrics, okay? Satisfaction with automated test speed and output, perceived productivity, how much is my code base complex? How much do I perceive my code base as complex? It doesn't exactly matter if it's very complex, but if I think it's very complex, then I'm probably going to have a problem with getting around, and cognitive load will be probably higher. And this metric and this framework is actually one that has very little actual productivity and performance metrics within it. It's mostly self-reported. So if we're going to take all these foundation measurement frameworks, we're going to see that neither actually encompasses everything. Neither stands on its own as a single framework we should be using. DORA is very specific. You should measure 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Space says, look, you need to measure all dimensions of satisfaction and flow, but I'm not going to give you the metrics. And DevX actually very focused. It does have the metric, very, very focused on experience and not on performance. So, okay, what do? We have 3 foundational frameworks, but neither one actually does the work, and this is not the holy grail of measurement. So on top of these come kind of more holistic frameworks. This one I think you should be very familiar with, or kind of deep dive into this one. DX Core 4 is, I think, one of the more advanced and more holistic frameworks out there. It gives us 4 pillars: speed, effectiveness, quality, and impact. And within each one, they actually have metrics, very specific, well-defined metrics, diffs per engineer, change failure rate. Here we have a lead time, deployment frequency, and also self-reported metrics like perceived quality. So we're measuring actual quality, but we're also measuring perceived quality, ease of delivery. This is a sentiment, not necessarily a metric. And all of these actually can create at least a more rounded picture of engineering productivity. And this is actually, I think, hundreds of companies are using DX4. Many reported productivity gains from using DX4 and improving on these metrics. But the question remains, is this the holy grail? Are we stopping here? Where's AI? Okay, there's this is pre-AI measurement. And we're asking, okay, so where's the impact? Where's the adoption? Where's the utilization? And that's where this framework comes in. So this one will be the last one we're going to see, so no worries. AI measurement framework is a new framework from DX, which actually gives us also an dimensions of how AI is impacting. So 3 pillars, we have utilization, impact, and cost. And here it's a bit more easy to understand. You have AI tool usage, how many active users we have per week, per day. This is something we can get from dashboards, we'll see soon. Percentage of PRs that are AI assisted, how much of the work we're doing is AI assisted. We can see an impact. We have AI-driven time savings, like hours saved per week. We have the core 4 metrics here. And in the cost, we have AI spend. How much are we spending on AI? How much time saved in dollars we have on AI? So this kind of makes more sense, right? We have a bit more depth within the AI space, but the question remains, what happens with background agents? So we have AI, we're working on it within our IDE, we're having code completions, but now we're having background agents running in the CI or running in the background. Should we measure our agents like people, like teammates? Are we going to give them satisfaction surveys as well, asking them if they're happy in the job? Are we going to look at them as an extension of the developer that's activating or operating the agent? So are they measured like we're measuring the developer but not the agent? Are we going to measure like a team lead? Let's say I have 10 agents, background agents. Actually, I have a few. I work with about 3 or 4 agents constantly in the background. Am I an agent boss? Should I be measured like a team? Or what about agents that I'm not even triggering? I have an automation in the CI that runs an agent and does some stuff every time something happens. Should I measure it like I'm measuring an automation tool, like Jenkins? What does that impact my productivity? So how do we actually handle this stuff when agents are in the game? So this is an interesting layer. And luckily, we have this latest edition. When we are adding agents to the mix, we want to make sure that we are going to add some metrics in each one of those pillars. So utilization, we're adding tasks assigned to agents. Look, this is actually looking like we're measuring like people. Tasks assigned to my agent. We're measuring how many they did. We're measuring human equivalent hours of work completed by agent. So we're actually measuring the time they spend. And if the cost, we're measuring them by an hourly rate. How much is my hourly agent costing me? So this is kind of starting to look like something a bit more encompassing that is also future looking into where agents are going. And this is a 3-week-old framework after many, many months of research. So this is, let's say, the cutting edge of measuring AI adoption on top of the DX Core 4, which is on top of DevX, Space, and so on, and Dora. So if we're looking into all this if we want to kind of sum things up, we have foundation frameworks that are actually not holistic. They don't stand alone on their own. We have on top of those a few more measurement frameworks. And on top of that, we have an AI layer to measure utilization and cost and impact from AI. So all that is really good. But the question is, how do we start? Where do we go? Are we going to implement a specific framework? How do we do this? We're not going to look for a PhD on measurements. We just want to get started. We want to roll out some baseline because honestly, we should have done this before we put AI into the game, right? We want to have a baseline of before and after, but we already rolled out the tools. We want to start moving. We want to start measuring. This is not going to be a good time to stop and 6 months of evaluation of a measurement framework. So let's talk how do we start in real life. So the best way to start is to really quickly go with surveys. It sounds like, it's just a survey, but actually surveys are very, very useful and very quick to roll out. And they give us a lot of dimensions and data that we don't get from APIs and metrics. One of those is the satisfaction, which is a very, very important determining factor and leading indicator to success. We can determine perceived impact on productivity. We can see whether they're using it daily or weekly. If we don't have this data, we can see the top use cases. Are we generating tests? Are we using it for documentation, for bug fixing, for refactors? This is something that currently AI tools don't tell us. They don't tell us what tasks are we working with AI on. And most importantly, they tell us the challenges and gaps the guys here addressed that not all the developers are equally adopting. And when we ran tests, we saw the Pareto principle. 20% of tokens spent on AI in the organization belong to, 80% of the tokens in the AI being used for AI is about coming from those 20% of the people. So there are power users, they're crunching it, and there are all the rest, which are kind of auto-completing, tabbing away, not very much involved. So this stuff really, really helps and should be run quarterly. This gives us an immediate baseline that we can start, and then we add another layer of the measurements on top. So if we forget all the measurement frameworks, I think the common to everyone is adoption, utilization, velocity, and quality. If we look only on those categories, okay, and we start to look into curating our own baseline metrics, I'm going to give you some example from a company we work with. This is what they chose, okay? They saw, okay, we want to see quality, adoption, utilization, and we started mapping out metrics, for example. For example, unit test coverage, they take from SonarQube, the tool. We can see defect density from Jira, like how many bugs do we have in the product. We can see the PR sizes, and we can see the rework rate from Git, the code churn, how whether code that's written with AI actually goes back into rework after less than 3 weeks, okay? And we can see also number of security vulnerabilities and change failure rates. So this is a very small set of metrics. Maybe you need probably about 4, 5, 6 in each category, but you can at least get a good picture of where you are at quality. And each company has their own quality measures, okay, and gateways that you can take this data from. If you want to look at adoption, utilization, you can run surveys. You can measure the amount of developers out of the total that have a license, that are actually using it every day or every week. You can see at acceptance rate for that question. What is the acceptance rate? So from our experience, it moves between 20 and 40%, which 40% is extremely high. And usually it's around 25, 30% for acceptance rate. So if you're looking to see where you are at those kind of levels, if you're over 25, you're in a good place. If you're under 20, you probably, it means that every 5th suggestion you accept. So think about a developer, he's trying 5 times and fails. That's not going to be a good reason to adopt. So you want to be closer to a third of the times, okay? Acceptance rate of around third is really a good place to be, or at least a good starting point. And velocity, every company and every team measures a bit differently. Story points delivered, sprint velocity, there's some metrics on Jira. You want to see the total completed PRs and lead time and pickup time for PRs depending on your company, but you have to really decide about what velocity means for you, and how can you actually, where is the signal coming from? If you create this table here, like this for you, and choose 3, 4, 5 of those, you can get started pretty quickly, okay? And the key thing here is to really do this by team. So if you're not measuring each team differently, then you won't be able to compare team A with team B and see why exactly one team is adopting well and the other one is not. So you want to be seeing all of these at the team and repo level. So this is really kind of how to get started, run surveys, have your baseline quality, adoption, and velocity metrics. It's not a very kind of cutting edge or innovative initiative to run, but if you don't do this, you'll stay in the same place of guessing and assuming and perceiving, and you have to go, if you want to go to the next level, you have to have at least this baseline, okay? So we discussed about frameworks. We said there are many options out there in baseline metrics, and just to get us off the ground, let's talk about tools that make our lives easier. So we don't have to really handpick and do this for every company or every team. You can actually use some tools. So Cursor, who's using Cursor here? Awesome. So Cursor, I'm not sure if you're using, but Cursor has this default analytics. It's not very fancy, but it does a fair job of seeing who's active, what's the total usage, what's the tabs accepted, lines of code, premium requests being collected, and also usage per feature, are you using chat, are you using Composer, and so on. So this gets you started very nicely, but luckily for us, we have a community and actually very active. This is from the local community. If you know LangTalks, Gal Peretz released his own dashboard for Cursor, where we have here usage champions, persistent users champion. We have growth leaderboard. We have top performers, and very able and a nice UI that we can choose between the users and the team. So this is a cool one. I put also the links for you at the end. No worries. You have every link here in the presentation. You take away. There's another cool tool from the community, Adopt AI Now. You can put up your metrics files from Cursor and see also interesting breakdowns. So the community is actually helping us to really make it easier to create our own dashboards. So that's Cursor. GitHub Copilot, anyone using? Awesome. So GitHub Copilot has a GitHub Copilot metrics API. I'm not sure, not everyone are familiar, but the cool thing is that the community has built open source dashboards that you can put your API key and just dump everything in there. So this is one Copilot metrics viewer, and this is a BI, Power BI. If you're using Power BI in the organization, you have an add-on from the marketplace. You put it there, put your API key, and you start to measuring acceptance, engaged users by language, by editor. You can start to choose between the teams. Pretty cool. And there are a few more of those, but generally it's becoming easier to measure adoption and usage. But if you notice, no velocity, no quality, no triaging of different metrics. This is just usage. So we're just seeing one aspect of this entire kind of multi-dimensional metrics. Cloud Code, roadmap for GitHub Copilot. The cool thing about GitHub is that if you have your code on there, you also have your commits, your PRs, your repos, your GitHub Actions. Everything is in one place, so they can actually triage and make very interesting correlations for impact. So the roadmap is about to release in this queue a much deeper dashboard that we can use, and they have something that maybe others don't if you run your CI and other stuff on there. Cloud Code, anybody's using it? It's pretty. It's going wild, but I see it's not yet highly integrated into the Israeli ecosystem. But Cloud Code has as well another metric dashboard, just very basic, but still good enough to start. We can see who's using, how much is the activity and the adoption, and see also team members. And this is a good start. Nothing from the community yet on Cloud Code. A bit too early, maybe. So everything we see here from the tool manufacturers is very focused on usage and adoption. They are blind to everything else. But that doesn't make our lives easier because we're pretty much in the same situation. And now we want to talk about tools that do this for us. Okay, so we don't have to do everything from scratch. And there's a new, let's say, it's not a new thing, but this is becoming extremely important to put in some software engineering intelligence tools into our stack. So SEI tools are, according to Gartner, going to be heavily used by engineering teams. 50% increase in the next in the next year and a half of adoption of SEI tools. And what they do for us, that's an all-in-one tooling. Okay, so they are connected to Jira, to security tools, to CI/CD, and Git and Jira and all that stuff. And they show us in one place adoption of AI tools, usage, velocity, quality, impact, surveys, you name it. Everything happens in one platform, and everything gets correlated with all the metrics. And this stuff not only helps us to get this visibility and measure engineering in general and AI impact, it also helps us to act in real time. So once you have all your metrics in one place, you can actually start to put KPIs, engineering goals. Let's say you want to improve your pickup time. This is LinearB, an Israeli startup, an Israeli company with an SEI tool. And let's say you want to reduce your pickup time on PRs because this is slowing your team down. You can actually put a threshold saying, hey, this is our team KPI. We want to reduce the pickup time for PRs because AI generates a lot of code for us. We're having a review bottleneck. We want to start moving faster and release that bottleneck. Let's put an action, a trigger, every time that the PR starts to snooze too long and age, we want a worker to go and notify us on Slack or Teams and say, hey, help us meet our target for the team. This is going to take only, only a few minutes to review based on our AI estimation. Have a go. And this actually accelerates not only seeing data, but actually acting on it. So cool thing about LinearB, they have, other than measuring AI tools and other engineering metrics, you also have something called Gitstream. I'm not sure if anyone familiar with Gitstream, an automation tool over Git. You can actually pop up some questionnaire in the real time. When you do a PR, you can say, hey, I was using AI, I was not using, I was heavily using, this was all agent. And you can actually label the PRs on, and then dissect the data based on the tag. So this gives us an interesting opportunity to come in real time. This is called experience sampling, which means I'm coming to the developer at the moment where they do something, and I ask them, hey, how was it? How much did it take? What did you do? Did you use this one? Did you use agent mode? Did you? So I'm actually getting some data points that usually I don't. It's very hard to get unless I'm spying on their ID or something like that. So this is an interesting way of doing things. Another cool tool called Milestone, an Israeli startup that's very heavily focused on measuring and AI as well. And they have interesting metrics like this. You can see I'm doing bug density 21% improvement over Gen AI assisted code, and they can compare code with AI assistance and without AI assistance. Okay, this is becoming easier, so it's less scary than it was in the beginning, right? Because there are tools that do it. They don't come free, but they save us a lot of time. Cycle time with AI, before AI, and so on. So think about all the different intersections and correlations of data you can do when everything sits in the same place, and you can compare that with lines of code and Git commits and PRs and Jira stories and security vulnerabilities coming from a different specific release reported by your sec tools, and now you're getting to start to see the full picture. Okay, so they support Copilot, Augment, and Qodo. We have DX, the team behind, the research team behind DevX Space, DX Core 4 and AI measurement platform also have their own platform, and they support tons of AI assistants. And they started doing this also. You see AI agent utilization, what comes from an agent versus what comes from a developer that's auto-completing code, which is pretty cool. This is future-looking as well. And this is very interesting tools coming up. And the last one is Jellyfish, another tool that's in the bundle. Same thing, you can see, for example, percentage of PRs assisted by Cursor and work time saved with Cursor, without Cursor, how much faster we're actually going. Okay, so this is starting to make sense, right? This is really, really the beginning, the early days of these tools, but this is where we're going. That's why AI engineering teams are going very, very heavily on these tools. So we saw measurement tools coming to the rescue a bit, right? Because it's pretty hard to collect all these metrics and figure out which comes from what source and get the API, and maybe these native integrations can help us. And I think this is a good time to start to talk a bit about tips and actually see a case study of what happens when a company gets stuck at 5% productivity. Yeah, you want to ask?
Can I have a question about measurement tools, and maybe I missed
Yes.
it? How does it understand what was with Cursor and without Cursor? We had this question, how to mark the PR was done with Cursor.
Okay, so
That is committed.
yeah.
Just the
Okay.
accepted.
So different tools have a different.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. So the question was about how do these tools know how to correlate the data? So each tool has a different method. Okay. For example, for adoption and general metrics, they use the APIs from the tools, like we saw in the open source. For correlations, each one has their secret sauce, but they compare commits. They have all the data and metadata from the Git layer, okay, and they cross-reference it with different data sources. So LinearB does it by popping up a checkbox when you commit your PR. Milestone do it. They don't tell you how they do it, but they have a very unique algorithm to figure out which part of the code was AI generated and which part isn't, based on different metadata coming from the Git. Okay, and they have a unique proprietary technology to do it. DX the same, and Jellyfish compare it as well with different metrics and tags that they put in. They don't tell you.
It's a secret.
So it's a secret. So for Linear B, it's not a secret. For others, they don't reveal exactly what they do, but they can show you exactly how it works. So it depends on the different. Each company has their secret, let's say, algorithm to figure it out. But for example, can tell you DX. They have a plugin that says it monitors the operating system, and eventually, when files changed in a very large volume in a very fast time, that means that no human can type it. That means that AI-generated code which was inserted. Okay, so there are different ways. It's like the Git blame for AI. Okay, so there are different proprietary technologies, but the reality is the secret is not only about figuring out where AI comes in. It's about correlating with other data points. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't the statistics themselves very biased? For example, if you would ask people if you use the AI or not, and then you measure the velocity for this type versus this, but maybe the kind of PRs that you are using to have assistance from AI have a different character. So I think statistics-wise, it's very, very biased.
Selective bias.
Yes, so the question about bias in the data. So it depends how you measure. If you pop up for every PR, you do the same, okay? And you just measure which PR was with AI and which wasn't, for example. Then you have all your PRs and they're labeled. And you can grab the labeled one. But if you have more labels, like this is a bug fix, okay, and you only compare bug fixes with AI and without AI. So you have this base to compare. If you're looking at all the files being changed on the operating system level, and you see that those files were, and that diff was actually pushed into a PR, and you tag it automatically. Okay, but you can also, the idea is really about tagging data. If you tag the data, you have a base for comparing like apples to apples, and not deep refactor and debugging complex logic with minor documentation addition. You won't be measuring the same, probably on the same kind of this. But this is still early days. This is really the beginning of how, and the questions about whether we are doing it correctly, they should come up. But in reality, we need to start somewhere and build on top of it. I can tell you that this is evolving very quickly. So every few months there is a new technique to pull in more data. This is about the signal. We're looking for the signal. If we don't have the signal, we'll never have the metric, right? So, okay, let's take a few quick tips and case study, and then we'll take away and maybe get some questions. The first tip I have is really to focus on what we can actually influence right now. Okay, the leading indicators for success are from adoption and utilization, and throughput comes later. You will not see in the beginning until you have a mass volume of developers working most of their time with AI. You won't see needles moving downstream. You won't see faster motion. You won't see throughput. You won't see very tectonic changes on the outcomes until you actually get the wide adoption and use case coverage. Otherwise, you'll get stuck somewhere in those 5 to 10% areas. Okay, so in order to really start quickly, surveys, simple open source or a dashboard from the vendors like we saw. And that should get you pretty quickly to adoption and utilization. And this is where you should focus on, and sustainable impact really comes later. Okay, so that's the first tip. So the second tip is that following up on the last couple of questions, the people and processes like AI tools are not enough. If people don't want to adopt it and they have friction, they won't. These are questions coming up from customers and clients. I see them all the time. I don't want to switch to another IDE. This doesn't actually compile. I don't trust the code. Should I be writing tests first and then generating code? Or should I be generating the code and then asking to generate the tests? Should I be, I'm supposed to deliver faster, but the bugs are on me. So I have to be extremely careful about what I do, and this eats up all my gain, right? I'm writing code in 2 minutes, and then I'm reviewing it for 2 hours. So what's the point? And this stuff developers are really in an identity crisis. If I'm not writing most of my code now, am I still a software developer? That's a good question. So we should be mindful both for this human factor and the people here. People aspect is incredibly important, like you'll see in the case study. And we need to be upskilling. Like Monday gave a teaser about their AI training days where you're not allowed to write any code. So upskilling is extremely, extremely important. Instead of throwing the tools at people and say, hey, become more productive, 25%, give this to me next week. We need to be thinking that these tools change every couple of weeks. There's a new feature, every couple of months there's a new tool. We need to be increasingly and continuously upskilling and sharing knowledge in the team, because when people feel they have a support system, they trust the process and they start to adopt faster. If they don't, they'll have all the excuses in the world why this doesn't work for them. And the last point is about flow. Flow is incredibly, incredibly important in order to adopt a tool. We anyway have like 90 interruptions a day every 3 minutes, and it takes us between 15 to 30 minutes to go back to flow state. So that means we're actually really struggling to get our job done. And most developers, they don't want to use AI. They just want to get the job done, and this is a tool for them. And we need to make sure that tools integrate into the workflow. And that's a good example is the Monday MCP that we saw there, because we want to bring in all the context into the IDE. We don't want to start all day prompt crafting and context crafting and copy pasting. This eats into our productivity. This hurts our flow. This is the reason why most developers will adopt a tool that it's integrated into their IDE, but it will be very reluctant to use a tool that takes them outside. And that's very, very important. So that's one tip that I had. And the last tip is, what do we do with the saved time? So, okay, we free up 20% of our engineering, way to go. What do we do with the rest? So what should I be doing if I finish my work in half of the time? Am I going to get more routine work that I'm going to do with AI? What's the point? What's my motivation? And also, as an R&D leader, I have to be very intentional about what I do with this time I actually save. And the reality is that that's where the impact comes from. That's the secret. If you save on velocity and then go on Twitter all day, what do you do in this? What do you invest in? So the best teams that actually get the best value and best impact, they reinvest it in a compounding way, like compounding interest. You save some time. Instead of pulling your savings from the fund, you actually reinvest them in the same stock, right? And this is the same here. So some ideas were from customers that actually did some interesting time savings and reinvested. We'll see in the case study very shortly. Automations and MCPs, making ergonomics and developer experience more easy and friendly. AI readiness. Are we preparing? Are we not doing a knowledge assembly like the AI knowledge base MCP? Are we doing documentation, coverage of tests so agents can fail and fix their own stuff and we don't have to bother us all the time? Are we investing in infrastructure? So this can be custom rules, instructions. This could be a lot of things that can go back into this flywheel of saving time, investing in more savings of time, and investing more savings of time. This compounds. This is the non-linear way to succeed. Reduce debt. Some of the debt slows us down, but it also slows the agents down. No testing, product standardization in the requirements is lacking, so this doesn't actually go through the whole cycle. So product debt, quality debt, security debt, starting to really compound. And this is really a good investment because AI is really good at reducing debt and nobody human wants to do it anyway. Going beyond code generation, that's the holy grail, and we'll see how that amplifies a company. So, okay, we got coding generation done, okay, or at least we're pretty advanced. What do we do beyond code generation, the rest of the 85%? Because where are we going? We're going to a world where we're not going to write code. So accelerating coding will ultimately say that we are just going to be 5% of our time coding and 95% of the time not coding, and that's where AI is not really helpful right now, or should it be? And we need to be going outside of the code generation comfort zone into the SDLC and start to do some innovation and productivity initiatives and get those bottlenecks out of the way, like code review, how do we standardize that, and quality gateways, how do we standardize that, and so on. So let's see how this looks like in reality in a big company. Okay, so Fortune 100 media company, 1,000 developers, 40 teams, got stuck, 5% productivity, naive rollout of GitHub Copilot, can't get the ROI up. So what we did with this company, we had a very intensive integration over several months of GitHub Copilot, and we managed to get them to 15+% productivity gain measured. This is story points delivered. Okay, but this is a holistic measurement. There's quality, velocity, effectiveness, impact, various other metrics, and 96% satisfaction from developers. And this was only the beginning, and this is across the entire R&D. So multiply by 1,000 people, and you'll get tens of millions of dollars per year. And that was only stage one. So that was a lot of champion program, training, kind of support forums, recognitions, and various other initiatives focusing on the adoption and the utilization part, the human factor, the process factor. What did we do with all the 15% productivity gains? We reinvested them back into other AI initiatives. So we looked at the entire software development lifecycle and found 13 more optimization areas in the product requirements, in the test generation, test case generation, QA, code review, searching code, planning, and various others, and integrated a software engineering intelligence platform to really see how everything connects together, and also internal developer portal powered by AI and various other optimizations, taking them another 10% measured productivity across the board. So that's 25% productivity. That's not perceived. Okay, that's actually measured. And this is a flywheel that keeps spinning, and they're on the way to make more and more gains. And this is at scale. So this can be done, but it has to be measured and it has to be managed. And this is not, this is a lot of many people spent many hours on making this work. So let's summarize, and then if we have time for questions, we can do that. State of AI in terms of rising adoption and costs. Still very hard to measure impact from AI on R&D. We have a few frameworks and tools and metrics. The foundation ones, Dora, Space, and DevX, we should get to know. They are actually what everything is based on. On top of that, we have the DX Core 4, a more holistic and practical measurement framework. And in the emerging category, AI measurement matrix plus the agents from DX, this is actually adding the AI layer to it. Categories we should be looking at. Okay, so productivity is not a magic. It's not a magic metric. It's actually a combination of several categories of metrics like adoption, utilization, velocity, quality, and effectiveness. And in terms of measuring usage and adoption, we have the AI tools that are coming up. We have Cursor, GitHub Copilot, and Claude Code. Everybody has their own dashboard, and the community has open source ones we can use. And we can go also down the software engineering intelligence path, where we have all-in-one tools like LinearB and Milestone, DX, and so on, that makes our lives more easier in terms of getting all the data points into one pane of glass and then correlating. In terms of tips for succeeding there, you should start by focusing on adoption and utilization. These are the leading indicators, and if you fail there, impact is not at reach. So this is where you should be focusing your attention. Tools are not enough. Focus on people, invest in their training, in the process of making this AI integration a bit more seamless and not very high friction. And then reinvest your gains back wisely in order to create a compounding flywheel of impact. And this is all based on seeing and optimizing what you measure. So if you want to optimize something, you want to measure it, and then you can actually go and do this in a cyclic way. So that's it for my end. You have here your resources. Oh, it's not mine. You have here the resources in the link. You also have a small feedback form. You can leave some comments there. And you also have all the links, all the research, and all the metrics and everything there in the links. It's embedded links, so you have to click on the text. You'll see that. So if we have time for questions, we have time? Okay. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Yes?
That was acceptance and actually code review.
Mm-hmm.
Just take into consideration the fact that you accept one operation doesn't mean that you actually accept your AI suggestion. Sometimes like,
Partial acceptance?
It's more, especially when you go the agentic way,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you get a little bit to the balance between checking every line
yeah.
or just let it like run.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tension, psychological tension of the developer,
Mm-hmm.
and probably if they let the agent go,
YOLO mode.
exactly, then it's like you accept, repeat backwards, break down, throw everything away, and repeat, right?
Yes. So yeah. So if I understand the question, so maybe you can rephrase the question, or is it a question or a statement?
Is accepted
Yeah.
measured correctly?
Is acceptance
Measured correctly.
measured correctly? So it depends. We don't want to measure acceptance on your way to. You want to measure it at the PR level. So if the code is not pushed, then the acceptance doesn't matter. Okay? So it has to correlate with the push. I mean, if you just accept and then you delete the code, so you want to see what part of the diff actually is AI generated. It's not an exact science, but from the tool. Anyways, it's a measure that you cannot actually own. This is out of the box. You have to take it or leave it, because acceptance is measured by those who suggest. That's GitHub, that's Cursor. They decide what acceptance actually is. So if you want to deep dive into what acceptance means in their book, then if you go in, for example, the GitHub Copilot, you see what activity and acceptance actually means. And there is also a measure of partial acceptance. So if you edit part of the code, but it's not fully yours, it's still considered as acceptance. But if you ignore it or discard it, that's non-acceptance. So it depends on if you're on autocomplete, if you're on chat, if you're in agent mode. I kind of tend to agree that acceptance will be worn out a bit as a metric when agent mode is becoming the dominant part, and you actually didn't accept almost, I mean, it created everything. It's not made in chunks. It's usually doing a lot of the work in one go. So this is what we have for now. And perhaps with agentic agents, there would be another measure of acceptance. And maybe we won't be looking at acceptance. We'll be looking at PRs done by agents as a concept, and not going into each line, because you may want to take the strict approach saying, OK, this is all AI stuff. I'm not sure if the developer actually typed in a character, and even if they did, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Questions? Yes?
I think smaller organizations, like a few dozens of engineers, can still benefit from implementing metrics and measurements, or is it something that...
Yeah, so I'll tell you that what I think small, yes, do small teams actually need to go through all of this stuff and measure productivity as well, not only large organization. What I think, they should be the first and the most diligent ones to do it. The reason why is because they are light on resources and they are late to the market all the time. They have to kind of fight their way into the market, and they should be the ones who have the easiest life, right? Their new code base, very modern. They can move. These are the ones that can move 2x faster, while other teams in their domain, they also try to move 2, 5, 10x faster. So velocity is the most critical path for success for startups. And they have the easiest life because they have only 10 people or 20 or 50. And they don't have years of data and bureaucracy. And they just say, Yossi, can you just do this for today? And then we have it. So, and organizations, the big ones, they take tons of time to move and get the integration, and who owns that system and who owns that system and who owns that, and all the integration stuff, super heavy. And startups like, okay, let's do it. And they do it in one day. No excuse there, I think, because they are the ones burning the probably the most amount of tokens per developer. They can go to the thousands of dollars per month if they're an AI native, really kind of hardcore team. And they have to choose the right tool, and they may be using multiple tools. I think that the answer is yes. Yeah, and that's easy for them to run a survey. It's like, how is it? Yeah, another question. All right, so thank you very much for your time. Cheers.